All right, if I can have your attention, we will go ahead and start. And I know that as we start, we are going to have more and more folk come in. And I also know that we have some folk that are going to be joining us online as well. And if they don't watch it with us this evening, they will join in and watch later on. So this is one of those healthy discussions that we need to have as a church family. I always say we can do, a lot of things, but we got to be a real family. We have to lift up integrity, and we have to lift up transparency, and just be honest and loving with each other. And I hope I stress that well, that it's honest and loving. So many times our honesty can come out rather brutally, but I invite you that we're not here to make any decisions tonight. We are here to discuss. We are here to kind of lay forth some ideas, and we're also here to listen to what you have to share. And any questions you may have, we want to be able to answer them. And if we can't answer them, I promise we will not make up an answer. We will take that and ask and figure out what we need to do. But let's go ahead before we go any further. Let's begin with the prayer. Loving God, we just praise you. We give thanks for this day. We give thanks for your amazing grace that just abounds in our lives. Help us to stay connected and focused on you, and how we give thanks for this church, for all that you have done for us to see us to this point in this place and this time, and how you have so many wonderful plans for us ahead. Help us to live into your future for us. Help us to stay connected to Christ, and help us to continue to be the church in all things. And it starts with us having a discussion tonight. Bless us now. In Jesus' holy and powerful name. Amen. All right, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I don't think I've ever used one of these fancy microphones before, but I do remember the first time I saw one. It was Garth Brooks at Texas Stadium in the late 70s, and it was just awesome. I think they had him flying, too, like Peter Pan. Anyway, thank you all for being here. In a lot of ways, we did this already with the other town hall, so you'll hear some repetitive things, but because the ultimate choice is likely to be different from the one we brought forth on the other town hall, as Jason said, we wanted to have this meeting and let people listen and participate as they wanted to. Let's see. The Finance Committee told the trustees, before I was on the trustees, by the way, and before I was involved at all, please be creative and go find some things to augment our operating budget. If you think about it, it's been under assault multiple different ways. We had the diaspora to St. Andrews of several hundred families. We had COVID. We had other pastoral changes. We had the UMC conversation and disaffiliation. All of those things, if you look at our operating budget as a bucket, giant holes were being placed in it, and it's a challenge. And fortunately, we have had great Finance Committee members and chairs, a great staff with Val and her team to help juggle, and lots of help from the foundation. And that's not sustainable, so we need to find another way to go about this. And I come to this may be obvious and not worth stating, but just from a stewardship perspective. We've been given this fantastic campus, 13 plus acres. How do we best use it? How do we use it in a way that would be pleasing to God? Subset of that would be the 1.9 acres, what I call the North 40. See it up there now, or up there now. The North 40, far north and east corner of our campus. Whether you say unutilized or underutilized, that's what it has been. To me, it's a godsend that God gave us that extra land for us to use in a stewardship way to help augment our budget, carry out our mission, both programs within the church, be the hands and feet of Jesus in the community. And we're lucky to have that to work with. I'm lucky my wife just showed up too. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we had a working group, Val and Casey and Scott Boynton, former trustee, and myself. Next, please. And we engaged Endura to be our broker on the ground lease at that time transaction. And then we had informal support from lawyers and civil engineers we know and have worked with a long time. We will engage them later. They helped us in the meantime. And so that was very helpful along the way. So the direction from the senior pastoral staff at the church back maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, it's been a while, was to pursue a ground lease because the Book of Discipline seemed to say, if you've not read the Book of Discipline or spent some time with it, try to avoid that if you can, because it's a challenge. But it seemed to say you had more flexibility with a ground lease than you might with some other path that we'll talk about this evening. Level of control over the property. You have a contract, which is the lease agreement. You can put restrictions in it, limitations in it, thou shalt nots. Well, in another context, like a sale, you can put deed restrictions as part of the sale. I convey this property to you, but of record are all these thou shalt nots, limitations, so you can get functionally to the same place as with a ground lease. But it was felt back then that it was maybe easier with a ground lease. Maybe that's true, maybe not. And then we had some legal tax and other things were fine, no problems with that. The tenant would pay the ad valorem taxes. Right now, our whole campus is exempt, but that piece of it would not be exempt after that transaction occurred. But that was the tenant's obligation, just like it would be a buyer's obligation if there's a sale. Next slide, please. 18 months, at least 18 months, folks have been at this. We had 2 or 3 interested parties, but only one where we really got serious and spent time negotiating. And I think that's completely because a ground lease in this market, as opposed to Manhattan, you just don't see them. People aren't comfortable with them. They don't exactly know what to think about them. They have models that they put all their data into, and they just don't know how to do it with a ground lease. And I think that kept people away. But the one party we did go back and forth with for a long time, in good faith and reasonable, good folks. I think it's just the value of that site. It's just unique in this marketplace. Look at the intersection of Sunset and Broadway. It's the same kind of value, even though it's not quite as visible in the real estate community. We did get a letter of intent and negotiated quite hard for a long time. We had the same economics from day one for about 18 months, and then, next slide please, the big curveball came to us. The party we'd been dealing with, and I don't think anybody was playing games, they just had a time at which they needed to do this. They went to their equity partner, and they went to their lender, and those 2 parties said, we don't like the terms that are on the table, and had been for 18 months. So they came back with a counter proposal that didn't work for us. So the numbers that were there didn't work for either party, so we had to take a step back and say, what other approach can we take? And we checked the discipline and did a deep dive this time. Before we quickly got to a ground lease, didn't really do a deep dive on a sale to see if it produced a different result. And we have concluded after the deep dive that it does not. We have the same use of proceeds applied to our operating budget with a sale as we could with a ground lease. I kind of look at it as a fork in the road. You either go this way or that way. I think we have an inverted V fork in the road. You start here and end up there, or you start here, end up at the same place. I think that's where we believe we are now. Okay, if we go to a sale, this is the last slide before the questions. Jason may want to jump in. He may want to correct some of what I've said. But we think the market acceptance will be very high for a sale. We'll have a lot more people who express an interest, and that's good for us to have that competitive landscape as a seller. I can almost see that. Same use of funds. The book of discipline is just hard to slog through, but the district superintendent and district strategy team are on board with our pursuit of a sale on that same basis. So our working group is recommending to the Board of Trustees, subject to Jason's timeline, go forward and see if we can negotiate a sale with somebody. So that's where we are. Next steps are, Jason alluded to some of them, having meetings, going to Sunday school classes, et cetera.
One of the things you've already heard me say was that this is the beginning of the conversation, that we want to continue to, and we understand that not everybody can make a 5:30 meeting on a Wednesday night, so we're glad that you're here. So we'll try to do this at a Sunday school hour and say to everybody, hey, at this time we'll be here. If you want to come, you can come, and we'll talk some more about this. And I will say, I think one of the things, and I kind of want to reiterate this from last time, and then y'all can actually help me remember, because we had some concerns that were brought up, and they were very legitimate concerns. The first concern that we had was, are we honoring the past? Are we honoring our forebears who, with great faith, took a step to move from Broadway out here to Basse? And it's almost interesting to think now, but it was like we were moving into the boonies. There wasn't anybody else around, and to look at how it's all grown up now, I mean, I don't even know if they could have imagined what was going to happen. And that was always a legitimate concern, and we always wanted to make sure that we honored the sacrifices that they made. I think if and the other thing you could never predict were all the things that had happened that Steve has already talked about, with what got us to the point that we're at. And again, those were things like the mass exodus to St. Andrews, which happened around 2016, and then we had a senior pastor after 24 years retire. We had COVID, a pandemic. I don't know that wasn't really in my way of thinking. And some things that had just kind of taken us, and that we were looking at finding some other streams of revenue for this. And so we always wanted to make sure we were honoring that, and that we didn't want to take this gift as something that was lightly. I think what you saw in our decision to not move forward unless it was a good deal for the church was wisdom. It was an ability to say, this doesn't work for what our needs are. And we're sorry that this doesn't work for your needs either. But I guess that's just where we find ourselves. So we kind of came to that impasse. The other one was, well, who are you going to put in, if we sell that property and they develop it, what are they going to do? Are they going to put we didn't want residential, because that means they're here all the time. And the other thing was, we had talked about, I didn't want to give away my parking place on Sunday morning. I think me and a couple other people park out there. And I feel like I walk all the way out. That's how I lost all that weight. So you might want to try it with me, who knows? We would have the ability to control who comes in there. Because we would have, and Steve can tell you more about this stuff, like the deed restrictions. Just like we would have had with the 99-year lease, we can say, put the restrictions that can't be whatever it is we come up with. I think the other one was, because at one time we were looking at some type of a medical, kind of a clinic type doctor medical office. That's what it was. And we said, well, we don't feel comfortable that be a place that would be able to perform abortions right next to the church. And so that would have been one of our restrictions. Another restriction was we didn't know that we wanted to have like a 4 or 5 story building, and so we were going to limit it to 2 or 3. I think we were in that was part of the negotiation as well. So there were a lot of things that we could do with the land that we're still wanting to do with a sale. And then the answer, of course, is if someone says, well, we buy it and then they turn around and sell it to somebody else, the deed restrictions go with it no matter how many people end up owning the land. Am I getting into some of the things we were going to talk about?
Depends on what the audience would like us to talk about.
Well, I was just thinking, I wanted to address some of this, some of the things that we talked about this time last year. 12 months ago, we were here talking about this. And so I wanted to make sure that we addressed some of the concerns that they had then to make sure that, number one, we heard your concerns, and they were our concerns as well. And we wanted to move forward with integrity, and we wanted to move forward with just being as transparent as we can. There's no curveball that we're trying to throw here. We're just wanting to level with everybody and talk to people and listen to them. So, do we want to ask for questions now?
Yeah, anybody have questions? Sure. There's a microphone
There's a
here.
microphone up here. If you don't mind coming to the mic, because we do have
You'll be on TV too.
We have people listening at home. How are you doing? Good.
So, first comment is,
I don't know that your mic's on.
doesn't seem to be on, right?
We can help you
It's
with
on.
that.
It's on. Just pull
It
it
is
up
on?
a little.
Is it on? Okay.
Okay.
Before I get into this, I'm going to have to say that I've been a member of this church I was baptized here. And the sound system in this beautiful church is terrible. There has this vibration, this echo. I wish that you could find somebody to fix that, because I can't hardly hear in here because of that. But anyway, moving on to what we're talking about. So I'm a longtime San Antonio broker, been through a lot of ups and downs. I own properties up and down Bassey. Broadway, I developed the first Starbucks in San Antonio, there in Alamo Heights, the Sleep Center, et cetera. And I still own a building at 970 East Bassey Road, which is the third bank, Sunflower Bank, that I've had in there. I officed at 1000 East Bassey Road, a little freestanding building right behind the Walgreens on Bassey. And my landlord and friend, John Koglaser, owned the building. We stayed there for 21 years, and one day Chase came knocking on the door. There's 4 banks in a block. I own one of those bank buildings, and there's 3 other ones. And they said they had to have that building. And John said, it's not for lease. We're just going to all croak here, which we were. John, me, we're all going to just die there, and that'd be the end of it. And they came back again and again. And finally, this 4,600 square feet, they offered him $182,000 a year for a ground lease, meaning they're going to pay all expenses, 100%, and they're going to put $500,000 into the building to retrofit it for the bank you see today. And he finally came in, sheepishly, and I said, John, you got to take that deal. We're all still together. We just moved up Broadway 2 or 3 blocks. You got to, that's crazy. Who would take, he sold that lease, the ground lease, and with the Chase paper for $5 million on a 4,600 square foot building to some investor from Colorado. So that's the power of a ground lease. The other side of that coin, I would say as a broker, is a lot of people don't like ground leases. They'd rather own the property than have a ground lease. So you have to think about that. You know, and that is not what I call a retail location. I call it a good location for certain things, like you said, maybe a medical, this, that, and the other office. Office is terrible right now. 50% of the office buildings in San Antonio are empty. No one's going to build an office today building because there's just no money going to be coming in to do it. So you got to think about other things out of that box. Medical, I don't know why you wouldn't want a 4 or 5 story building. Who care? How would that affect this? And I know that the attendance is down. All churches are down. We have this beautiful church, and we need to have some income to offset that downturn in attendance. So those are my comments for what they're worth. Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. lots of experience. Is it happy hour yet?
Ed Benson, could you share with us who the broker or which brokerage firms you've retained?
The one that we had on the slide, Endura, E-N-D-U-R-A. Corbin Barker is the principal there with whom we've been dealing. Has worked it very hard, has been very patient. Yeah, that's, I didn't hear the first part of what you asked.
Their record, what properties have they currently?
I'd have to look. Maybe our friend from the community would have a list of their stuff. They're well regarded. Corbin's a straight ahead guy. You'd like him. Glad to take you to lunch with him if you'd like to meet him. But Endura's been around for a while. I know some other names there, but I can't remember them without looking at their website. Anybody else? Raj?
I'm asking this question because it's been posed to me. I think I understand based on what I saw. There we go. How's that? Okay. I'm asking this question because I've been asked this question. I believe I know the answer based on what I saw on the screen. But the question that I was asked was, will we still have 2 driveways off of Nottingham if we sell that property?
Yes.
Thank you.
For a while, we talked about making sure we had the one off Peter Bach, but that is not as important. Ginger, you have any questions?
What is, should we move forward, what is the approximate timeline that we could be looking at for something like this?
You know, with rezoning and replatting, those sorts of things, we're probably looking at 12 to 15 months. You know, coming to a deal, if we have somebody who's motivated, I think we can get that done in 90 days, but the rest of it, which, you know, we've talked about doing the rezoning parallel to getting a deal done because it'd be fine with us if that was on office.
I think another thing too. What's that?
Yeah, okay.
I
you're
got
on
some
now. Adam's got the control.
I think another thing that we want to make sure is that nothing's going to feel rushed in the sense. It might feel rushed if you're not tuned in, but the point I'm trying to make is we want to do our due diligence on this side as well, as that we talk about this as a family before. You know, we didn't rush the deal for a ground lease. We're not going to rush this, and that becomes very important for me, that we make sure that people are heard. I mean, one of the things we wanted to have tonight, I mean, if we came tonight and we said, here's an idea that we had, and next thing people are going, hey, I've got some tar and some feathers over here, Pastor, why don't you come over here and pay me a visit? I think that would have helped us understand where the church was. And we would have said, okay, this may not be the route we need to go. But again, it was just kind of to see what's out there, to feel our way through this. And I don't exactly know how long that's going to take. That's just a process. Yeah. And so we talking tonight's the first step, doing something on Sunday morning. The second step, kind of seeing when other people start calling and saying, hey, I'm really concerned about this. I think a lot of times sitting down one-on-one with folk and hearing their concerns. I've said this a lot of times, but a lot of times when people get anxious, and when I mean anxious, I mean this causes them emotional pain. They kind of stop listening to me because they are trying to formulate their next sentence. And so at that point, it's important for me to listen and to connect with them and then to try to help them understand, maybe assuage that anxiety, to let them know that we take this seriously and the process by which we get to the end is just as important as getting to the end. And that if we get to the end and everybody's angry and nothing worked, then it wasn't a successful ending. So let's move there in a loving, grace-filled way, honoring and listening to everybody, and then doing that which is best for the church in the long run. So that's really what we're looking at. I know, Ed, you had a question.
Yes, what is the appraised value of that acreage?
About $3.3 million.
Really? That's surprising.
Did you think
That's surprising.
did you think it would be higher or lower?
Lower
Lower.
in this market. And I'll tell you why. No one's building anything much anymore because the interest rates are too high. So everybody's kind of put a pause on these kind of things going forward, is because it just costs too much to develop with the cost of materials and the interest rates to develop much. So that kind of surprises me, but having said that, good luck if you can get it, I mean, obviously. And I don't know, this church property here, I have one other thing I want to say. We bought it during the real estate meltdown of the late 80s for nothing, next to nothing. So they bought a lot of land when the land didn't cost much. Now you've got all this extra land you really don't need. If you can sell it and try to keep this church going, to me it's a plus. Or ground lease it.
I like the way you think. I mean, it's all stewardship to me. I mean, we've been given these gifts and resources from God, and how can we use them in a way that would be pleasing to Him?
I hope the other part of this, and Steve may have said this already and I just missed it, was if we could sell it, whatever we were able to make from it, we could put into an endowment that could then, and then we wouldn't end up, it would do the same thing as if we had a ground lease. It would be a yearly source of income, not just a one-time injection of a whole bunch of money, which at some point would run out. It would be a way to have continual kind of staying power for us and something to help us as we move forward. So in some ways, it really would kind of honor the gift that we were given, 30 years ago by being able to say, hey, this is going to continue to help us every year to do things we need. Even if those things seem to be, just taking care of a 30-year-old building and making sure that we get our sound right in here. Because it is a big thing, and we're going to keep working because it's a beautiful place, right? But it's got this high ceiling, and it's cavernous, and so that's part of the problem. So we're working on that. I know we got good people working on that, and they're going to come up with solutions. I think maybe the thing that's holding us back is money, right? You can do anything if you got enough money. So, yes, Helen.
Jason and the group, my father, as I recall, was one of the people that found this piece of property, and it was owned by the Marriott, and he was very proud. But back to your first comment about whether we're honoring the people that came before us, he would be thrilled to know that we were going to get more out of it than they put into it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we are honoring them by doing
Well,
more with it.
Helen, would you do me a favor? Would you say exactly what you just said into the microphone so people at home can hear us? Because that was excellent.
We're old guys, we can't hear much, particularly with a bunch of echoes.
My dad was one of the people that found this piece of property, and it was owned by the Marriott. And I think he and his team of people, which as I recall included John Larroquet, John Lloyd, those were great business people, and they would be honored to know that we did more with it than what they put into it.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Here, here. Got to go with the times. Too much land. Can use that money for better things.
It's a gift.
Other, you don't have to ask a question. If you have a comment to be made, we want to listen to that as well.
You know me.
I know. I feel like you might be holding out on us. Yes.
Can you talk about the parking restriction? Because some people may not have heard that.
So yeah, I can quote her. She asked if we could talk about the parking restriction. And when you asked parking restriction, what were you meaning in general about?
We could use it.
We could use it. Yeah. So that one of the things that would help us, if it was something like a doctor's offices there, medical building, then they're going to use that, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. But then we would make sure it said in the restriction that, hey, on Sunday, this parking lot, we could then use it. We really thought, well, gosh, what happens if we have a really big funeral? Well, we've had some really big funerals, and guess what? We've looked, and we've never flown over or flowed over into that parking area. The other part of this is, the good news is, we are not even talking about being good stewards of the land that has got that strip right there, and if we ever needed, we could either pave that, or we need to look at, how do we make that something, here in a downtown area that would honor the community, whether it's putting and I'm just making stuff up. Don't feel like you're quoting me. This is not gospel, okay? This is just me kind of dreaming for you. Putting some soccer goals out there and having kids come out and use that area. I mean, how is it that we as a church who've been blessed and given so much are making sure others, we'd still own it, we'd still use it when we needed to, but we could also make sure that it's pouring life into our community as well and making a difference. So did I answer your question with that?
I figured some people might not have heard.
Some people might not have heard that, so we want to make sure that yes. And so we're not really going to lose Sunday morning parking. The other thing is, COVID changed the world. And I hope when y'all look at the bulletin on Sunday, you see that we have more people watching online than we do coming in person. And more people watch Monday and Tuesday than do concurrently with us on Sunday, even though we do have a group of folk that do that as well. And that number keeps growing. Now, our attendance here in person is also going up. But I don't know that it's ever going to get to a point where we have to start or bring back that 9:30 time. And it's not that I wouldn't do that. It's just that if I do that, then I want to make sure all of our services are high quality and that all of our services that we're being good stewards of our space and of our times and all those kind of things together and our worship together. But I don't know, just like universities, colleges, they have in person going to class stuff, and then they're still doing stuff online too. And that's just how COVID changed the world, and that's just where we're going to be. So the nice thing is, I always look at, put those numbers together for our total worship, because right now we're around 1,200 to 1,500 people every Sunday that are worshiping with us. And that's a beautiful thing. Even though it may not feel that way, we only have 500 or 600 here on the campus in 3 services. We actually have more that we don't see.
And the sound's better online.
And the sound's better is online, but we do love to see your smiling face too, by the way. Do y'all feel like, hey, we've been here and done this before? We really got to do this again? Yeah, go ahead.
I speak in favor of using this asset to further the ministries of this church. And I looked around the room a few minutes ago, and we probably have a half dozen or more of us who were here when this land were purchased and who participated in those capital fund drives. It's not just the past. It's as though we have the baton that we're about to pass to another generation. And I think we have a responsibility to be, as you've said, good stewards of that resource for that kingdom purpose. Thanks for listening.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. And Twyla, were you?
Yeah, I was one of, we were part of that group that had done the fundraising, and we were told, no, we couldn't build down on Broadway, and then found the property, and I understood back then that we wanted the whole block, but and the assisted living was already taken, and so I don't know whether it was offered or whether, because we only had 30 days to determine to take it or not, that we took the rest of it or we walked away. So I don't know, and we've never used that. Interestingly, we paved that, but when we had extra overflow, we used to park on the grass on the northwest corner, and we never really used that property. But it kind of came as a package, is my understanding, from 30 years ago. And so, to me, the more valuable to the church would be the west part, the part that's not paved for whatever reason, and we have used that from time to time because it's so much closer to the building. That's so much further away from the building, it doesn't really lend itself as well. But that's my comments.
Yes, but it is good to walk from if you're trying to lose weight. Now, another thing I'll encourage you, as you're gonna be kind of the eyes and the ears out in the congregation, and people are gonna start talking about this if they aren't already, and we want them to talk. And so, number one, if you hear somebody talking and you're in favor of this, don't try to defend this position. Just listen to them. Just love them. And if they want to know more, and if they need to hear more, send them to me, send them to Steve. We're willing to meet and talk with them. And so I want you to hear me say to you, try to listen to them, try to give them information. And if you can see this isn't going well, say, hey, let's talk to Jason, Let's talk to Steve. Let's because there's probably something else going on there. It's not just I imagine there's even a pastoral care need that probably needs to be addressed. But I just want to lift that up to you. That I think if we start getting defensive about this, that just makes other people reactive and defensive in return. And we just want to make sure that we're loving and that we're listening to people. So. All right, I get the feeling like we're done.
We want to thank you for your due diligence.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate that. So we were thanked for our due diligence, and that's an important part of why we're doing this, is we want this. We did have, I think the last time we did this when we were a year ago, we were looking at maybe about 80 to 100 folk had showed up. So I just thought that's what we would have tonight. And but I noticed that what we lack in quantity, we make up for in quality. And so I appreciate that. So I tell you what, Steve, you have anything you want to close with and something you want to say before I pray us out?
No, I think this is a watershed moment in the life of this church for, as you said, the next generation. And I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah. I do. The only question I have is, where did you get these really nice stools? And why haven't I had this? I could preach so much longer if I had a comfortable place to sit in front of y'all. I mean, I could go for hours like this. Anyway, just a thought. Did you have anything, Val, that you wanted to share? Okay. Well, let's be in prayer. Loving God, we do praise you for this night and for the ways in which your Spirit is just moving within our church in such powerful and tangible and meaningful ways. May we continue to see where you're at work and see the things you're blessing. Instead of just saying, Lord, keep blessing the stuff we're doing, maybe we ought to say, Lord, how do we bless what you're doing? How do we get on board with you? And we know that your love and your heart for this church is even bigger than ours, and that you care for us, and you want us to continue to share the good news of Jesus Christ, not just for our sake, but for those that have even never, who live in our community and just have never heard the gospel, who have never experienced the fellowship of the faith. May we be a faithful church that, number one, enjoys coming together, but also sees beyond its four walls out into the world and is always offering Christ in new, innovative, and powerful ways. But be with us now. Help us as we move forward, because it's all in your hands, and we give thanks for that. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank y'all. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you, old timer. The acoustics have driven me nuts too.
Yeah,